just let's do a. I know we've done an introduction earlier, but let's just do a quick one. Just say who you are and why you're here, right? So there's a reason why you're here because of the role that you play. Charlie, over to you.
Oh, Charlie O'Brien, Membership Secretary, Digital Divide, Specialist Group.
James.
James Ambort, Higher Education Representative, Specialist Group.
Maria.
I'm the new Secretary of the Specialist Group.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom. I'm Head of Policy and Comms at the Digital Poverty Alliance.
All right, James, Comms Director at BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT.
Sarah Foxall, Director for Partnerships, Education and Public Benefit at BCS. Julia Adamson, who sends her apologies from here today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adele from the Digital Poverty Alliance. I'm the External Affairs Coordinator. Fiona, the Treasurer for the Specialist Group.
Hello, I'm Ruby Cord, the new Inclusion Officer for this digital group.
Dave Donaghy's a VC and Volunteer Coordinator, VC and Volunteer Coordinator at the Specialist Group.
And you know, I'm Freddie, Chair of the SG. We do have Margaret over the line right now. She may not be available because she did say that she may have to drop out. Oh, she's here. Hello, Margaret. Can you say a few words off mute, please?
Hi. I'm very actually delighted I managed to get the right link to join you. So I think that's great. But I think what we've got to do is try to actually, hopefully, carry on with what we started with digital divide, but progressing and reaching out much more. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So I'm really delighted that we are able to kick off this second BCS, DPA, BCS SG strategy day. I'm going to take a few minutes just to do a bit of introduction, set the scene, replay back what was done before. So let me just run you through. Now I have this imagery here that I've been using somewhat. Right, just because look at this one here. Yes. But then we need to try and make a point visually to people too, right? There's a lot of people that are disconnected. People don't understand why. People don't even know that it's an issue. So we need to do something more. And for today's agenda.
Yeah. Okay. At some point, I want to comment on your graphic, but that's no matter.
For another time, yes, yeah. Yes. Right. But for today's agenda, what we want to do is, after my brief introduction, to get the DPA to talk us through their 6 missions. Why? Because the DPA is the domain expert in this area of digital poverty. That's why they exist. And then I would like to get BCS represented by James to talk us through what are the BCS priorities, because BCS wants to support this mission, but we got to align them. And it will be interesting to hear the priorities for the BCS, right? And then from there, what we will do is that we will then use the rest of the time, break it into 3 sort of interactive sessions. This is interactive, yeah, so we will all get involved here. We have post-it notes over there, right? The first session is all about driving awareness. So Tom, part of the 6 missions is about awareness. So, you know, if you can help us facilitate conversations around that. The second one is around ideas about what we can do, because we all have many ideas. The SG, we have a few conversations, but today is the time that we contribute those ideas into a space that we can visualize whether are they all of equal importance or some are more important than others. We do not know until we put it all on the wall. And by the way, what is on the wall is not just about the SG, it's about what matters to the SG, what matters to DPA, what matters to the BCS. And then the third part of the session is just to try and see whether we can collate some actions that comes up from today, right? I think it would be really useful to have some specific things we can work on, right? So to get there, let me just remind us about what we did last year, right? Sometimes it feels like such a long time ago, and I'm not sure whether many of us have revisited this, but when I revisited this recently, we actually did quite a lot, right? The brainstorming has led us to all these so many line items here. And I want to sort of briefly mention the approach we took last year. We realized that there are 3 ways of brainstorming, problem solving. Yeah. One level will be top down. We have the privilege of having DPA and BCS because they can help down with top down stuff, such as policies, such as influencing governments. Those are things that many of us cannot reach, cannot do, and we should not try and do that, right? It's about joining the dots. So let's not do everything. Let's get the guidance from DPA and BCS. So top down, there are some stuff, right? Bottom up, That's what a lot of people are doing. Sarah, to your point, a lot of good stuff out there. But you know what? Many of them are not sustainable, not strategic. They will fall away at some point. But what we're going to do now is to find a way to see whether we can join them up a little bit better so that they can a bit more, they can sort of sustain a bit longer, or it can be a bit more impactful. And therefore, then what is the role of the SG? So this is why we also have a session around the middle layer. So if the SG is the glue in the middle, what can we do to help with influencing top-down stuff and also supporting the bottom-up stuff? So we become the glue that brings those two dimensions together. That is how we saw it last year. And therefore, I just want to call out a few examples. So top-down, the one that I'm most pleased about was, we said T2. Let's find a way to do a joint policy statement thing together. And that happened, right? We were able to jointly submit to the UK Parliament call for evidence regarding digital exclusion. We did it not just with the BCS voice, not just with DPA voice, but also with many of the tech sector organizations coming together. That was very impactful. So that's an example top down. Bottom up, we've heard a number of great stories today. If you look at B1 and B2, right? Lions with local BCS branches were represented by North Staffordshire branch, by Bristol and Bath branch, by Hampshire branch, mobilize more members at local level. So these are things that is already happening at grassroots level. But you know what? Many of us do not know what's going on because we do not know. So I think we need to do better in terms of helping to socialize all the things that's happening. So anyway, many things can happen today. What I would like us to do is to make sure that we end today thinking that this has been a worthwhile session. I don't expect all the answers today, but I'm hoping that we will continue to have these kinds of conversations. It's only once a year, right? That we can be even more joined up.
Do you want to try and record them?
Sure.
Yeah, we're recording already.
It's recording already, right?
Oh, already recording, that's good. Yeah.
Okay, and then, of course, what has the SG been doing? So here's just playback a few things. We believe that this journey of creating awareness and socializing the things that people should know has to continue. That is the same belief that the DPA has. So the BCS SG has been doing what we can, but maybe after today, we can be a bit more focused. Today, we just try and do everything, anything goes kind of thing. But maybe we say, look, let's start focusing on some specific areas of interest. Right, we talk about the joint submission, right? We also supported the national delivery plan. The tech sector is a committee member of the national delivery plan. The BCS is also a member of right? So there's a lot of legs into supporting the DPA, right? And then of course, this thing happened. The BCS and DPA signed MOU. So we now have that sort of framework in place. What are the things that is going to drive the actions in this framework? We have a responsibility to help to contribute towards that. Okay, and of course, part of what we do is the few pledges that I mentioned before earlier on in the webinar, tech support pilot, digital catalog personas, and the education sector, which Tommy, you are aware of, right? Coming together to create a sort of sector-wide digital inclusion strategy. I'm really excited about that, and we do have a call at 4 p.m. today. I hope you can join, yeah, too. Okay, cool. Right, so leading to the workshop, first of all, Tom, can I get you to tell us about what matters to the DPA?
So the DPA really focus, I guess, on two sort of core strands of activity. So the first is about providing practical support to people who are facing digital poverty. So we run a number of what we call proof of concept projects where we identify groups that need support. So we have a program that's focused on families, a program that's focused on prison leavers, one that's focused on teachers, and one that's focused on schools. And we basically work to provide that support and then work with a university partner to evaluate what are the benefits of giving technology to particular groups. And so we hope from that not only to fill an immediate need in terms of people that need devices, need skills, or need connectivity, but then also understand in a particular context what kind of barriers or what kind of facilitators and enablers can encourage tech adoption amongst people who are digitally excluded. So that's one strand. The other strand then is focused on our policy and advocacy work. So as Freddie mentioned, back in May, we published our national delivery plan, which was really a first attempt to sort of set out the actions that we think are necessary to end digital poverty by 2030. So that's what we take as our sort of overarching mission. That is then divided into 6 core or sort of 6 sub-missions that we think are going to be important in order to make sure that everybody, no matter what their circumstances are able to utilise and benefit from technology. Should I go through the missions now, or was that okay? So just to run through them quickly, and I think there's a huge amount of overlap, I think, in terms of where there's synergies with the work that this group is doing and sort of what the DPA is trying to do. I think I should also say, to start with, that we see our role not necessarily as or not at all as wanting to duplicate what is happening. We see our role very much as a coordinator, because there's so much that's happening across the UK, trying to provide support to people, a lot of great initiatives. And so we want to be the sort of focal point around which we try and make sense and sort of join the dots, I guess is a good phrase. In terms of the missions then, quickly, so we've got 6 core sub-missions. The first is around raising awareness. So we see that as absolutely critical. So there's an aspect of raising awareness that is focusing very much on people in digital poverty, making sure that they're signposted to appropriate support, whether that's, say, the National Data Bank, National Device Bank, support that's happening through local food banks, other sort of community hubs and sort of digital support that people can get. So that's sort of one element of the raising awareness in terms of going to the people who need that support. There's then a second bit of raising awareness, which is about increasing the saliency and the urgency of action on this issue amongst 3 sort of core constituencies. The first is with respect to politicians, so making sure that policies are developed in a way that supports digital inclusion. So we've had the response now to the House of Lords inquiry that DCIT have published, and unfortunately, you know, because of where we are in the parliamentary cycle, it's probably not much of a surprise, but it seems quite evident there's not going to be major government policy anytime soon with respect to digital inclusion. There's not going to be a digital inclusion strategy. There's not going to be a specific unit. They have set up this interministerial group, which I think is good, but it's clear that, you know, no new financial commitments, no real sort of commitments are going to be made on the policy front. But we are in a context where a general election is coming up, so I'd see that there's opportunities there to influence, you know, the writings of manifestos of the major political parties. So politicians and policymakers are sort of one group. There's then a group which is industry, so making sure that employers in the tech sector, making sure that employers, whether they're in the public or private sector, are doing things that support digital inclusion. So whether that's helping equip their workforce with essential digital skills, whether that's helping to subsidize connectivity or devices, say for people that are having affordability challenges in the cost of living crisis. So, and also device donations. We know that the donation of devices is way below where it needs to be in order to meet demand. And then the third sort of group we have to raise awareness with is civil society and the general public as a whole. And as well as sort of charities as well. So making sure that even though we had with the pandemic a sort of catalyzing point where everybody was focused on digital poverty, that sort of public attention maybe has dissipated a little over the last couple of years. So we need to think about how we reanimate that sort of conversation. So that's mission 1. The second mission is then all around devices and connectivity. So making sure that everybody, no matter their circumstances, has access to a device that's suitable for their purposes. So we know a lot of people, for example, only use a mobile phone to access the internet. That's good for some uses, not good for all uses. So we need to think about how people can get access to a device that will be suitable to meet their needs. Connectivity, I think, still remains an issue. You know, social tariffs, even though they're welcome, they're an imperfect solution to some of the connectivity challenges. So we really see that focus of that mission of encouraging both individuals and employers to donate devices, as well as looking to see what we could encourage from industry, but also in terms of government investment for a long-term settlement to help people access connectivity. Mission 3 then is around ensuring there's an element of equity in terms of how people access the digital world. So making sure that products and services are accessible to everybody, making sure that people, if they have a disability or if they have, say, low levels of literacy, are still able to sort of use services and are still able to get benefits from accessing digital services. Mission 4 then is around skills, so making sure that everybody is able to access the opportunity to develop their digital skills. So making sure that provision is accessible at the point of need. And I think also importantly, not necessarily being tied to the awarding of full qualifications, because I think that sort of qualifications have their place. With the sort of support that we're talking about, I think is very much informal at the point of need in response to individual need. Mission 5 then is focused on research, so building the evidence base, so understanding how we can quantify digital poverty, but also building up our understanding of what is the lived experience of digital poverty, making sure that we understand how different sort of intersections of somebody's experience compounds to create unique ways in which it manifests. So really building up those case studies is important. And then Mission 6 focuses on how we build local capacity. So making sure that all local services, be they NHS services, libraries, local authorities, social housing providers, are all working together. So that's a bit of an overview, I guess, of the missions. And I think there's a huge amount of overlap with some of the things that you talked about, Freddie, in terms of the focus of this group. So yeah, really looking forward to the discussion and sort of seeing what we can do in terms of a plan to leverage our collective resources and expertise going forward.
So any questions around these 6 missions?
I missed what mission 2 was, sorry.
Mission 2 is all around devices and connectivity.
I think, right, okay.
Yeah, James, I've got it on the for context, please.
James, thank you so much for that, because I'm new to the game here, right? Can you just explain the DPA? Are you a government affiliated body? Where do you get your funding from?
We're an independent charity. So we're an initiative of our parent charity, the Learning Foundation. So that the Learning Foundation was set up in 2000, principally to work with schools and help them with their technology across schools. The DPA specifically was a relatively recent initiative, so it was created in 2001 in response to the pandemic. And so we're not funded by government. We're reliant on sort of donations from industry or sort of other partners. And we're basically working really, I guess, as that convener to sort of help bring together, all the activity that's happening in this space. But that being said, we do work very closely with, obviously, the government in Westminster, but also very closely with the Welsh government and the Scottish government too, but not technically funded by them.
Okay.
Unless I've massively lost track, you didn't mean 2001, did you?
Yeah.
2001?
The e-learning foundation,
Yeah.
as it was founded, yes, goes back that far.
Sorry, I thought you said 2001 in response to the pandemic.
Oh, well, so 2021. Sorry, yes, yeah.
It's a glitch in the matrix.
Okay, so now at least we all have some context. I think it's really useful to make sure that whatever we do, let's try and be steered by these 6 missions and use that as a way to create a framework that allows us to do the stuff that matters. Because otherwise we can do a lot of stuff and then we ask a question, but if it's not relevant, then why are we doing something, right? But before we do that, I think this is where we now need to hear from James about the BCS priority, because we don't exist independently. We're part of the BCS, and unless it's a BCS priority, again, we should not be doing it, right? So over to you, James.
Indeed, I can plug in. I don't think I need to, do I? I can just talk.
Yeah, and I'll just take some notes, yeah.
That's fine. So we are BCS. For those of you, not everybody here is a BCS member, is that right? So knows everything about BCS. So I think it's probably good to explain a little bit about what BCS is and does. So BCS, we are the Chartered Institute for IT, that we are the professional body for computing. So what does that mean?
Just carry on. Yeah.
That's fine. So important to know what thanks, Freddie. Important to know how we're different from other bodies, right? So the most important thing to understand is Tech UK are the body that represents the industry. BCS is the body that represents professionals, professional standards, ethical practice, the highest standards of competence, ethics, behaviours, and that sort of thing, right? So we don't represent the vested interests of industry, for example. It's really important to know that. So we rise above those commercial interests to represent what's best for computing itself. So that's really, really important to know. When people join us because they want to make the world better through computing and through digital skills. And that's not all they want to do, of course. They also want to advance their own careers. They want to grow their networks, but they want to do that with an element of altruism as well. So BCS is a kind of virtuous circle, so that's what we're all about. So how do we advance the practice and the benefits of computing within society? So we've got a number of priorities. I would say at the moment we've got three main priorities, one of which is building understanding of professionalism. And that is quite a difficult word to understand, but professionalism among policymakers, industry, for example, and the public. So what does professionalism mean? Does anybody know?
Yes, I struggle because as a profession, we can build mission critical systems and they fail. We have no liability, no professional indemnity. And compare that to, chartered surveyors, to architects, to medical, we have none of those. So yes.
So for a number of years, BCS said, oh, we're about professionalism. It's about professionalism, but nobody really knew what it was or how to articulate it. So we've now settled on the idea that really, to be a professional, we need everybody working in very, very high stakes tech. So whether that's AI, quantum, data science, climate change, digital health in particular, needs to be a registered professional, okay? So you need to be a registered professional, a member of BCS, chartered, whatever that looks like eventually, right? So you are a professional and you obey a certain set of agreed standards, okay? So that's really, really good that we're trying to push that forward as a policy ask. The second thing we're doing is we care about diversity in tech. So there's a huge problem, I'm just walking about because it's easier. There's a huge problem in diversity in technology at the moment. In particular, there are very, very few women relatively in the profession. And that has massive implications because when we look at things like AI, if you don't have diverse teams creating AI, the outcomes do not reflect the society they're meant to serve. So you get biased outcomes, dangerous outcomes, outcomes that exclude people, and that's really, really key to digital poverty. So we know that women make up about 20% of the IT profession and about 20% of those studying computing, okay? So that's really, really important. We produce data on that and talk about that very much. And that's really, really key to closing digital poverty. And then the final thing we care about is digital poverty itself, right? And the way we believe, because we are about, at our heart, computing education and digital literacy, the way that gap can be closed in the long term is through a number of things. So advancing the practice of computing in schools, advancing digital skills in the workplace, both together. And if you do those things long term, in the end, people will have the digital skills and the competence to thrive in the world. So whilst on one end, there's really, really valuable work going on in provision of devices, helping people like Age UK get online. That's the one end of the spectrum. If you start at the earlier end, from the age of 11 in schools, you can solve that problem long term and you won't have the problems we've got now at the other end. So to focus on that, policy-wise in particular, what are we asking government to do in terms of computing education? So we're asking for about 4 things here. So the current computing GCSE is too narrow in its scope. So we're asking for that to be broadened in scope in itself. So that's one thing we're asking for. Secondly, we're asking for a second qualification to be created, a broader digital literacy qualification that anybody in schools can take, and that will include broad generative AI skills, for example, might even include some elements of quantum, and that'll be done by the age of 11. The other thing is we just want general computing skills to be a much bigger part of school. So things like learning to use ChatGPT as part of your every lesson, all kids need to learn how to do that. And then the fourth thing is kids can't learn to do that unless the teachers know how to do it. So teacher training and head teachers' professional development training needs to feature AI much more prominently, for example, and digital skills much more prominently. So those are the 4 solutions that we're proposing to embed computing and digital skills in schools. So those are our major priorities. And just to illustrate that, this morning, Rishi Sunak, I was talking about this to many people, Rishi Sunak made a big speech about AI, the importance of AI to the UK and the world, and also the threats that AI poses. And we responded to that by saying, well, we believe AI needs to be a co-pilot, which is a big thing that Julia and Sarah have been promoting. AI is a co-pilot throughout your life. So that means that AI is your friend at school all the way through to your retirement, right? And that is a right that everybody needs to have. So it's a real really, really connects to the digital poverty agenda, that you're going to have this co-pilot with you and everybody needs to have that. And there's a real risk of digital exclusion here, because is AI going to cost money? Is it going to exclude people because of its cost? Already we see that ChatGPT has a premium rate version, for example. Are those going to exclude people? Are families that are even, not quite, even families that you wouldn't even describe as upper middle class, are they going to be cut out from the AI race, for example, when you get these different versions of AI going around? How much of an advantage is having a premium AI service available to you for your child? It's almost like a sort of private school advantage that it's giving you, right? If you've got that next to your child throughout life, these are the issues we need to tackle. So yeah, those are our three priorities, I think, for the moment. The fourth one is climate change and understanding net zero. However, those three are taking priority at the moment. So thank you. Yeah, not that it doesn't matter, but AI is such at the moment that we are focusing on that, and everything is being seen through that lens.
So
Any questions?
Just a point of information.
Yeah.
The use of the word co-pilot.
Yeah.
It's a Microsoft product. So as long as you're aware of that.
Yes, it's an Emerald product. It's also a word.
No, I'm just saying, just in terms of how it lands.
Yes, that's very interesting.
If you say you're going to use a co-pilot,
we're
you're saying
Microsoft,
Yeah.
potentially just be aware of it on.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting to know. Yes, that's very, very good.
I think the non-product term that we would have used at Microsoft before a product was about AI augmenting human capability, ingenuity, and you kind of go, AI augments what humans are brilliant at.
Yes.
But again, if you use that phrase, I think Satya said it, I don't know how many times.
It's just about how things land.
No, I think
So that's all I'm saying, So
it's
just a thought.
Dave?
Yeah, so a couple of things you said made me think about this thread, which I think it's relevant here.
Yeah.
When we talk about digital literacy, and we can start at age 11, and then in 30 years' time we're all good because we've sorted everything. Yeah, but that thread, that seems to me to be the kind of thinking we want to encourage in schools. It feels like we can expand digital literacy into scientific literacy, because the way that we want people to think, this is going to sound horrific, the way I want people to think, the benefits of that kind of thinking, when you expand it a little bit, is actually now all of our students at age 13, 15, 18 leaving school are actually much more able to talk scientifically, to think logically, to understand statistics, to understand politics, understand all that stuff. So how do we fit the digital literacy stuff into that wider picture? Is there a benefit to be had? BCS working with other scientific professional bodies, and you know where I'm going.
So BCS does work with other scientific bodies, but if you look at the computing curriculum as it is in school, it has broadly three components. One is digital, you'd think of as digital literacy in the sense, and that could be online safety, cybersecurity, digital behaviours. It has IT as classic, that we might all once have known it, use the tech, have that, but it has computer science, and it's not learning to code, although it's that learning to code in the context of you used a Bunsen burner in chemistry, right? It's the tools you use to explore the science, but they do computer science, and that is about that underpinning knowledge and understanding that enables you to comprehend the world in that way. In the same way you did chemistry, biology, physics, that is the case we made for getting computer science into the curriculum from age 5 in the UK, in each of the devolved nations. So I think that I'm just trying to think the other aspect of your question. The digital literacy piece. So as James was talking about what our policy asks are of government, the point about broad digital. So when was the last time you had a lesson about using a pen and paper?
1974.
How old were you?
5.
How did you then improve your practice? You used it in every other lesson, right? So that sense of if you have digitally equipped and enabled schools, and the digital literacy comes with and alongside every part of the curriculum.
I'm sold on the idea of digital literacy, by the way, fairly obviously, because I'm here. But I guess where I'm really going with the question is there a benefit to doing this in tandem with physicists and chemists, but and are we, maybe we're already doing
Yeah,
that.
so there's over the years, an awful lot of conversation through actually the Royal Society. A lot of us come together through the Royal Society around the definitions and stuff for the computing curriculum. There's a lot of conversation there about mathematics and data literacy. And if you talk about data literacy, where do you put that? There's elements of that that are in mathematics. There's elements of that sit inside computing. But actually, where it comes to life for a child is probably in some other lesson completely, right? It's in history when they start looking at plague data, playing around with plague data and seeing the power of data literacy to understand the world. So yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Fiona?
I just want probably to understand a bit more about how to make sure that a policy like that doesn't increase a digital divide. And it's not a criticism, it's just so school locally to me, they got some money from a local business actually to buy some new books for their library. They put them in the new library, and in 2 days they'd gone. They'd all been stolen. And they worked out they'd been stolen by the children. And so they decided to do a raffle where they said, if you bring back a book, no blame, we'll give you a raffle ticket and you can win a prize potentially from this raffle. And they got their books back. And the children that had stolen the books were the ones that weren't literate. And the reason they stole the books is because they knew that they had value. They didn't have any in their house and they wanted to have a book in their house. That's the kind of level of that school was dealing with in terms of what they had for their children. To go and say to them, let's get any kind of computing skills into that school where they are struggling to get books to children to read and their parents aren't literate is just so far away from where they are. But if we don't, it's just going to get worse and worse for those communities.
So it's kind of historic, but BCS was one of the key organisations in lobbying the UK government for £100 million investment a few years ago into supporting computing education. Now, it happens to be that £100 million pales into insignificance alongside the investments that go in every year to maths and physics and everything else. But for computing, that was a heck of a lot of money. Part of that was about teacher training. Part of it was also about supporting equipment for schools. There are other organisations, the Learning Foundation being one of them, which has approaches to support schools with provision of tech. But sitting alongside the provision of tech, there's an awful lot of support that BCS and through computing at school, but also amazing, brilliant computing science teachers have done. It's actually about computing with no computers. Unplugged, fun. We do stuff at BCS through a program called Barefoot for primary schools. If you don't know about Barefoot and you've got a connection to a primary school, please put them in touch. Amazing people like Paul Curzon at Queen Mary who do CS for fun, CS unplugged, all of this kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to mean, we do know the reality is that provision of technology in schools is not where any of us as technology professionals want it to be. That's not going to get fixed overnight. And actually that's why something like DPA having a strand that is concerning itself with coordination over schools is really, really important. I don't want us to lower our, it's almost like we want to have a high standard. It's like having an ambition as opposed to a order.
I appreciate it's a motive and slightly loaded comment, and that's
but
the reason
really
for it was we see it through. So my day job is with mental health provision, and you see the mental health provision for children. And what happens is the schools who have the time and resources benefit from the time and resources that are provisioned for them. The schools that don't have the time and the resources, who really do have the children in crisis, can't access those things because they can't access those things, and it's just a complete cycle. And I am wondering whether part of the reason my question is that because there's in the west of England there's this new focus on the digital policy aspect, and then recognising that across the region there is an issue with connectivity, with digital skills, and that's happening across the region. So they're putting in place these digital inclusion posts. But it really feels to me that if there's a school that is in locality that needs that, they're going to need almost to tap into some of that resource to help them to access the resources that you're talking about, and how can we join more of those things up a bit more?
So I think, so one of them is about, so I think when we look at the DPA stuff and those missions, what BCS does, the one that's about skills, we kind of like, really strong overlap, really strong. We can't do something on skills together. Anybody else, that for me, on policy, we're saying similar things up there. The one for me that stands out more for the member kind of the opportunity of BCS's amazing 70,000 IT professional members to me is things like the devices and connectivity. I know, to your point, Tom, how that gap, right?
Yeah.
I know when I was, the story from Microsoft, I was there at Microsoft, social impact lead, when COVID happened. We were really, really busy fielding, help us with devices. We had mission critical national safety customers who needed every single chip we could get our hands on out of our manufacturing supply, right? Because it's needed for a ventilator, it's needed for a blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, trying to think, how do we help? And the obvious thing is, how do we get kit refurbished? And knowing how to move computers from wherever they are to where they're needed, and the process that has to happen between there, the licensing that has to happen between there, it is sadly not simple.
Yep.
But to me, if you've got 70,000 IT professionals, if they knew one thing in digital inclusion, it would be how to make that happen.
So
what's the process? Sorry, I've gone into
I'm conscious of time, so if you don't mind me steering this a little bit, I know Ruby wants to make a point, but let me just talk about that, right? I'm an IT professional. The first thing I did during the pandemic was to encourage my IT peers to donate their devices in a more coherent way. Do you know what? Very, very difficult, to your point. You think recycling is easy? No. You think licensing is easy? No. There's so many issues. So if we think this is something of importance, guess what? Let's join forces and provide clear steer for the entire tech sector to say, this is how you donate your device and this is where you put to. We have not done that, and I managed to get somewhere, but it's not going to scale. But so back to the agenda today, you can see here, what I'd like us to do is, so that we know we need to have time, using this as a framework, we got to decide whether are we today going to be talking about every one of those 6 missions and doing something about them, or if that's what we need to do, but we can only start with one, which one do we start with first? And then we'll continue the conversation, right? So, but before we do that, Ruby, you got a comment?
Oh, because we're so time. We can park my question, but it's just one for you, James, about the BCS and where we're going, and to build on your point, Dave, about science. And I then started thinking about humanities. Okay, there's a great intersection between computational knowledge and the humanities in terms of where we're going, all the AI, the social impact of what that's having. And we've already got a branch called ethics in terms of what we're doing there. So it's just a thought, okay, as we expand our horizons about what the BCS wants to do, the humanities isn't mentioned much, but I do think there's greater intersection. And we haven't got time to answer it, unfortunately, because I'm conscious
of
time.
This is a huge priority for us. We've recently done an ethics survey with our members, and obviously we shared that with the government. So tech professionals do care about ethics.
Yeah.
Companies to publish ethical policies, for example.
Yeah.
Part of professionalism is ethics.
Absolutely.
It's new kid on the block.
You have a quick point to make?
Yes, I'd like to come in now. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. I put something in the chat following the point about reaching out, particularly to the youngsters about AI. I'd like to follow that up. We have a BCS meeting on the 22nd of November, and this is about some free resorts. Though it was designed originally for primary, but it's also being used now as secondary and self-learning children and homeschooling. It's now being translated. So this is material aimed at teachers, but youngsters, if they're in their secondary school, they could work through on their own. It's been translated now into 20 different languages. It's now been used in over 100 different countries. It's totally free. And I think that it's the Martin Lane that actually created it during the pandemic. He works for IBM, and because he had children at that age and he wanted them to know about AI. So it was all trialed on the children, and it's now, I say, been accepted. And in one of the countries, it's now become government procedure that it should be taught in all the government schools. So do pick it up from the chat. Can you pick it up from the chat? Please do. It's got all the details.
Yeah.
Otherwise, look on the 22nd of November and the events.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so let me just remind ourselves of the agenda for today, right? So we've heard about the 6 missions, we've heard about, the BCS priorities. What I'd like us to do now is just, continuing from what we were just saying, right? Let's do some interaction here. If you look at the 6 missions from the DPA, is there one that we say is like the most important that we start with, or they're all equally important, therefore we got to take one in turn, but it's just that we're not going to have time to do them all today. My recommendation is let's start from the most obvious thing that we've already started, and let's find a way to at least get it to a good place. And then, because it's a journey, right? We all agree we're going to solve all problems today. Awareness is still one of the easiest and also the hardest thing. I'd like to suggest, Tom, if you don't mind, right? Since I know the DPA is doing a lot. If you can help us facilitate a brainstorming session where we contribute ideas to what kinds of awareness do we want to create and what should we do? For example, the BCS SG today, we have monthly webinars. That is our way of doing awareness. And the topics are broad ranging. That's our way. Is there any further guidance about that? Is that good? Therefore, we continue, or let's be a bit more focused, so get it narrower. That's just one example. But more importantly, it's more about other ideas that we can do to create awareness. Over to you, Tom.
I mean, raising awareness, I think, is absolutely critical, because we obviously are in very much the sort of world of digital poverty, but it's always surprising having conversations with people that either aren't aware of it or don't actually recognize it as a problem. And so I think being able to talk to people and show them that actually this is a real problem, that without intervention, without concerted efforts to address it, it is only going to get worse and more consequential over time.